Welcome to episode 2 of North of the Boards, presented by Jackpot City Casino. We're a hockey podcast that takes you across the NHL and in Leafland, focusing on the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm your host, David Pagnotta. That's my partner in crime right there, Anthony Stewart. Sean Bell will join us later on in the week for another edition of the program. Stewie, how you doing, first and foremost?
I'm doing well. I'm sitting right in the pocket of Leafland, and the sky did not fall last night after the loss to Colorado, but the sun's a little bit dimmer today as we're fighting a snowstorm in the Northeast.
Yeah, all the snow fell, but the sky still up there. What did we get, like 50, 60 centimeters of snow, something like that? It's hopefully everybody's staying safe. Everybody's good on the roads. If you don't have to go out, don't go out. It's a disaster out there still. As we're doing this and probably heading into the week. It's cold all week too, so that's never good. But look, we got a few things to touch on. And, we got Birdgate, we got, Mitch coming back. It's been an interesting few days. The homestand has been garbage, quite frankly, for the Toronto Maple Leafs since they came back on the road, win against Winnipeg, come back, lose to Minnesota, lose to Detroit in overtime, lose to Vegas, lose to Colorado. And you've got Buffalo coming up. Stu, let's get it over with. Let's start on Friday. Mitch Marner returns. Lackluster performance by the fans. How'd you think of that whole situation?
I was there, and we were actually sitting probably about 2 seats away from each other, right?
Yep.
And the boos were deafening, right? And, we had a bit of a conspiracy theory that when they actually did the video introduction saying, welcome back, Mitch Marner, there seems to be a little bit of constructed cheers, right? Maybe it was built into the sound system there too, but I think the faithful did their job in really showing their displeasure to Mitch Marner coming back. But, the facts are, again, he was a tremendous Maple Leaf, 9 years there, one of the all-time leading scorers of all time. But I think for them, it's just more so about the accountability in not making the playoffs. And, I was sort of listening to the conversation with Mark Stone, after the game. And the way that he was talking, it was just as if they lost the game. And I'm like, you guys won. And he came in and sort of put a beating on the Maple Leafs. So that's sort of what we're talking about with regards to accountability. But again, you can't put that on the shoulders of one person, right? But again, I think the fans did their job in booing. They got their money's worth in the booing side. And, it was even funnier and crazier, if you want to say that, was they were actually cheering when he got off the ice. So, but ultimately, what was most important, Dave, was, the 2 points. And that's what they need to focus on at this point of the year, and they just did not get it. And yes, they did come back, make it 4-3, but again, just not good enough as this is a team's fighting for the playoff lives.
Yeah, and the performance overall has been questionable. It was questionable again Sunday afternoon in their 4-1 loss to Colorado, almost 4-0. Domi with they were kind of scrambling in front of the net. He potted it in with 1:02 to go in the game, but another too late scenario. And we're seeing now with injuries on this club that it's clearly impacting them in a variety of ways. You talk about goaltending all you want, and I don't know about putting Stolarz in against Vegas. I mean, hindsight maybe plays a factor here, but all of a sudden he's in the net, and surprised everybody, by the way, in the morning that he was going to be the starter. But regardless, I think, of who's in net, the deficiencies on this club, Stewie, they're pretty glaring. And you've got 4 top 6 forwards. According to math, that's not 6. So there are holes on this club that they haven't been able to fill. And when you get injuries now, it's affecting your game that much more.
It is, right? And you go sort of back to last season, right? And what was probably one of the main factors in this team having success, and it was Stolarz and Wall playing to the best of their abilities. And we understand there's injuries in today's National Hockey League, but no one's going to really feel sorry for you. But that was sort of the backbone of the team performing at such a high level. So that this year was not the case, as the last 2 games, I think, were the first time you had the 2 in between the pipes and on the bench the first time all season. So the goaltending's there. You take a look at the defense. Tanev, how many times last year with regards to, sort of all the distractions, right? One was going to be the defense, and can they really hold up, and the injuries. We didn't talk about the defense once. And I think it was started with Chris Tanev sort of being the back end stalwart, the guy that was the anchor, the guy that cleaned up all the messes, blocking shots amongst the league leader in shot blocks in the NHL, and him just being injured. he's a big piece, of that blue line, right? They have to go out and get Troy Stetcher, who's used to playing 11, 12, 13 minutes. They're thrusting him into a role where he's playing 18 to 24 minutes on any given night. So when you have the goaltending that's struggling, and then your sort of forte last year was the defense is struggling, it just sort of crumbles, beneath that. But I'll tell you this, and I never prayed for injuries, but when we had injuries as a team, when I was in Florida, Atlanta, Carolina, I actually said, you know what? It's my time now. It's my time. This is my time to go and show the coach that I deserve to be on the second line or on the power play. So guys, in today's NHL, and you heard Craig Brewery say, you can't make excuses. You got to sort of stand up and walk up into what's, forcing you guys to sort of play high level hockey and really answer the bell. And it's just not there, Panks.
On that front, I thought Easton Cowan was going to be able to kind of harness that. And I understand rookie season, you got ebbs and flows of your game. You get ebbs and flows throughout the season. Nothing's straight line upwards all the time. But I'm a little bit surprised they haven't given him more runway right now, especially when the team starts to flounder a little bit. Like, this is a rough one. We'll get into this stretch in a bit, but 0-3-1 in their last 4 at home, not a good look. I figured, okay, you have Domi and McMahon playing with Austin. And then you've moved things around a little bit because of the injuries, Nyes with Tavares, and they modified that yesterday in the game towards the end of it, where they put, I think it was Nyes, Tavares, and Matthews together for an odd stretch, and then it was just Tavares and Matthews. But for Cowan, is it time now to start giving him a little bit more responsibility in the top 6? Let the leash off a little bit? What do you want to see from him, and how do you want to see him deployed?
Does this not remind you of a particular situation with a particular player over the last 2 to 3 seasons? Is this not Nick Robertson 2.0?
Yeah, whatever do you mean?
And again, I'm a big advocate of Nick Robertson, but ultimately in today's cap system, you need young guys performing outside their cap hit. You're looking throughout the league, and you look at the Wyatt Johnsons, they thrust him into a role right away. Stankoven, when he was with Dallas and now being a contributor in Carolina. So you have all these young guys that you really need to perform at such a high level. And we know the Caulfields and the Demidovs, like that's a different type of pedigree. We understand that, but Cowan is a first rounder, and you got to see what you have in that. And the proof is in the pudding. Look at some of the other teams right now. There's a good young prospect in Fraser Minton sort of playing a high-level hockey for the Boston Bruins right now. I think he'd be right now on this current Leaf roster, 13 goals, and put him probably 3rd or 4th on team scoring. So you got to play the young guys. We understand you're going for the Stanley Cup, but from an asset management standpoint, you need to see what you have in some of these young players. And ultimately now, if you don't put Cowan now in a second-line role or a top 6 role, what are you going to be doing in free agency? You know what? You're going to have to go pay a premium, $5-6 million to go maybe get a guy that could put the puck in the net that you probably already had in a Zach Hyman, right? So again, you got to play the young guys. You got to give them an opportunity, but you got to put them in a position to succeed. And it doesn't mean putting them in a top 6 role and then roasting them after they turn a puck over in overtime. You got to live with the good and the bad with some of these young players. They're going to make mistakes, but part of them in turning into young superstars is just giving them that leeway. And look at Caulfield, right? Remember when they came before St. Louis came in, he was in the minors. They were sort of roasting him in the media. St. Louis comes in, works with them, and now he should be an Olympian, but that's another conversation right now. So you got to play the young guys, give them an opportunity, but at the very least, know what you have before you make a final decision on them.
Yeah, going back to the Caulfield and the Montreal Canadiens, like Juraj Slafkovsky, first overall pick, different spectrum here, but he's a guy that was up and down and up and down and up and down and 50 points a couple of years ago, 50 points last season, but he didn't get it till the second half of the season. They worked with him, modified his positioning, and put him on a different line, top 6 minutes, and that line's really producing. He's playing with Demidov, he's playing with Oliver Kapanen, and that young line is being given responsibility, and his game has improved to the point now where he's on pace for 60, 70 points. So taking that model a little bit, nothing wrong with giving the younger guys, the opportunity to learn. And it's not just a one-game stretch. You've got to be able to kind of spread this out. Or to your point, guy coughs it up. All right, well, we're going to drop you down to the 4th line. You're not showing enough confidence, within your group and within those players. But, you mentioned, the offseason and having to do things. Bobby McMahon is, really producing well so far this season. He's on pace for 25 goals or something along those lines. His price tag might be in like the $4-5 million range. How do you, maybe more, depending on it? Like, do they allocate money for that? And Scott Laughton's another one where they haven't started meaningful contract negotiations yet. I think that's going to come. But to this point, it's been fairly quiet outside of a few conversations back and forth. McMahon specifically, to have that secondary scoring piece, can they afford to give him that kind of money, like a 5x5, or should they reallocate it elsewhere?
They say history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes, right? And we've talked about it with this group multiple times, right? It's like a conveyor belt. You go from anywhere from 1 to 2.5, and if you're making over 2.5, you're out the door. And you sort of look over the years, right? The Mikheyevs, the Trevor Moores, the Zach Hymans, we got to pay Bunting. Oh, you know what? See you later, right? Yeah. So ultimately, to have success, and there's guys that get you to the playoffs, but there's guys that get you through, and those are those guys between $4 and $6-7 million. The secondary, and my quote that I use, the tertiary guys. We know the Austin Matthews and the Nylanders provide primary and secondary offense. You need those guys that step up, and Bobby McMahon is one of those guys. And you can deny his talent all you want, but ultimately his numbers speak for itself. And when you're big, you're strong, and you can skate like that, regardless if you're scoring goals, those other factors affect the game. So we're not pulling, 5x5 out of the air. Like, Dave, you're an insider. You know what's going on. You know the conversations that are being had. That is fair market value. So I know sometimes with the cap, and I know it's going up, and sometimes it's a square peg through a round hole, but you got to pay these guys $5 to $6 million. Or what happens is you get a guy like Matthew Nyes who knocks it out of the park in a completely different situation as he's an RFA, you're going to have to overpay. So I think for him, you lock him in 4 or 5 years because you need guys like that, especially in playoffs, because they're going to be keying in on some of the high-end guys, the Matthews, the Nylanders, the Tavares. You need some of those guys that can squeak through and get some of that secondary scoring, and Bobby McMahon fits the bill.
I want to get to Willie in a second, but we're just to segue off of Bobby onto his line mate, the captain, Austin Matthews. Austin was fantastic earlier this month. End of December, he was, came back from whatever was ailing him for a stretch, and then just all of a sudden just got it going, and he was on a tear. And the last week, I don't want to say he's no-showed, but I don't think we've seen anything from Austin in this last week that he showed us in the previous 2 or 3. What's going on with him? Like, why can't he keep that consistency level for the full season?
Well, again, I'm not an insider. I'll leave that to yourself there too. But I'm assuming it's got to be injuries, right? But ultimately, if that's the case, take some time off. Take a month off. Take 6 weeks off. You're seeing some of the other stars throughout the league do it. Why not do it? We understand it's Olympic year, but sort of what's frustrating for me is again, my dad is a remote hog. He moved in with me now, and we sort of fight for the remote to watch a Leaf game versus a Montreal Canadiens game, and I have to sometimes concede, and you know what, Dad? You know what? We're going to watch Montreal, because as soon as you turn on the TV, who do you see? You see Suzuki, you see Caulfield, you see Slavkovsky, you see Demonov. You physically see them jumping out on the screen. That performance by Caulfield the other night, scoring that hat trick, like that is a top 10 player in the National Hockey League. That's how they play. So when that's sort of bestowed upon you, that's the expectation, especially with the salary and that. So for me, why isn't Matthews performing at that high level? For me, I have to say it's not like the Monstars came and sucked the energy out of him. Like, he's still a world-class player. So it has to be injuries. But for me, I'm like, I want to see that wow factor. And I tell you, I played in the Carolinas, and I played with the Florida Panthers. And I remember an Ole Jokinen saying, you know what, I got this. I remember Eric Stahl saying, you know what, guys, I'm going to put the team on my back and really get us back into the game or get us a big, big win. And with Austin Matthews, that consistency hasn't been there. And it's easy to say, yes, you're playing great on both ends of the puck. He's winning his face-off. He's blocking shots. But ultimately, he needs to put this team on his back. And why isn't that the case? It could be injuries. It could be a little bit of a production fall off. Either way, he has to be better, right? You're seeing McKinnon every single shift.
Steady.
Noticeable. Fire. Like it's your jaw dropping, right? And when you watch these other teams play, you're like, this has got to be that this is a Stanley Cup contending team here. So I think for Matthews, he's got to elevate a little bit, and we're going to until we know exactly what it is, we're going to sit here and speculate.
Yeah. We don't have to speculate about Willie Nylander. Gave everybody the bird on Sunday. He issued an apology afterwards and tried to laugh it off with the media on Monday. Did we make too much of this? Did everybody make too much of this? Was this blown out of proportion? Or what's your assessment of him allowing his annoyed inner thoughts be revealed?
Well, we are in Leafland, right? Where everything is, there's a little bit of fuel added to every single fire that's here, but
Steady.
I think he's got to know better. He's got to know better, Dave. You know that, right? And
Yeah.
I have a theory on exactly what happened. And being up there in the press box, you do understand that, you know, the TVs are there showing the broadcast. So I'm sure the first time they showed it, they show Nylander there, but next to him is Chris Tanev, you know, open up his ice cream and having one of those drumsticks that's up there. I'm not sure if they're a sponsor or not, and eating a drumstick. And I'm like, he's probably like, why are they showing that on the broadcast? So I'm sure he was annoyed. And then a couple seconds later, the camera comes back and he flips the bird right off. So in hindsight, I'm sure, you know, he's frustrated that he's not playing. You know, we saw him a couple weeks there with the tank top up there as well.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a, you know, a story within the story where in Toronto, they sensationalize everything, do not give them anything. Last year, all the noise was just about the team playing at a high level. And you didn't hear nothing. You didn't hear about Mitch Marner until the trade potential to Carolina. You didn't hear about Tavares losing the C. You didn't hear about Austin Matthews. You know what I mean? It was about the team on the ice. And I think he should know better that, hey, you know what? They're probably going to, you know, make a big deal about this. Let's not do anything or give them anything to talk about. And I think it was a distraction. I'm sure if you could go back, you probably wouldn't do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, the league is investigating. I don't know what they have to investigate. Just watch.
Case closed.
Yeah. Yeah. Just make a decision. Because it's happened before. I don't know if it's happened off ice, but I know guys like Ryan Hartman, Andrew Ference, I can recall just flipping off the crowd. It's happened a couple other times. I think those guys got fined. I don't know how much it was, probably $5,000 or whatever. So I guess they're determining whether or not they want to fine Willie for what he did, but that would be even like a little bit more extreme, wouldn't you think?
$5,000, like, you know, he just made $5,000 in the 2 seconds that we've been discussing this, right?
Fair.
So,
drop in the bucket.
But again, it's just, you know, and again, I'm just trying to go back where, you know, the only time that I was a superstar would probably be World Juniors, of course, but in my junior days, but I understood as being the star of the team and star of the town that the eyes were on me. The eyes were on me when I went to the restaurant, when I went and parked my car, when I was out in public. So that comes with a responsibility that, hey, these people are watching you and you got to find a way to hold yourself and represent the team and the city at the highest of your capabilities. So, but again, it goes back to sort of the persona, Willie Styles, laid back, you know, no cares in the world. But again, you know, the fact that we're discussing it, you know, I think they knew that was going to be the case. I'm sure that's why he apologized. So the good thing is, he took accountability for it. He explained sort of his side of things. He apologized. You know, I think we're going to move on, and we'll see if the NHL moves on. But again, if you're going to fine them, why not do it how they do it in the old Finnish system when you get caught speeding? It's based on your salary. So if you really don't want them to do it again and wear a suit up there in the press box, fine them $100K. I'm not advocating for that. I don't want the players. I'm advocating for the players making money, not losing money. But again, if you're going to send a message, do it the right way. But again, you have some fun with it and you move on.
Was it Solani, Teemu Solani, that has like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of speeding tickets that he didn't pay for a while?
Yeah, if I got $100,000 speeding ticket, I would move and I would never come back. Sorry, Ontario, I'm moving to Quebec or I'm going to New York. Yeah,
that would not be good. That'd be a little rough. Head to jackpotcity.ca and catch your bonus today. Play like a champ and win like a champion. Chaos or calm, Jackpot City keeps you in the action. Jackpot City has tons of slot games, massive jackpots, and bonuses that keep the action going while we keep the conversation rolling. Head to jackpotcity.ca, grab your bonus, and play responsibly. I'm going to jump in now. I'm going to get in on this. Let's get this game going. Last time I did it, pretty solid. While we're doing this, also pretty solid. I got to give some of the vets of the Toronto Maple Leafs a lot of credit. The guys that have been there before, that, you know, some guys always end up going home after the fact or wherever their home is. The Maple Leafs, some guys that have really embraced the city that didn't necessarily grow up in Toronto. I'm talking about guys like Tomas Kaberle, guys like Nick Antropov, who are part of that small win. We'll take that. These guys have embraced the city not just by sticking around and still living there and being part of the community, but also just invested themselves into the community to that point. We know that Nick Antropov still does some stuff with the organization, does some stuff for the team within the development process of the group and dealing with some of the young guys. And he's also entrenched in the community as well. Thomas Caberlet and his wife, they've got, I think it's at least one restaurant. They got a pretty good Italian restaurant in the city, and they've harnessed that and kept that going and been part of the market. You see certain guys that have been here that grew up there as well. Obviously you've got the Shane Corsons and others that have been a big part of this community. We've got a big spin coming up. We're going to get to this in a sec. This is always pretty, this gets you hyped up nicely because you got an opportunity to win over $1,000 and you could go home with $8. So either way, you're coming out ahead. So let's give this a go. We'll click on that and here we go. Let's see how we do. These guys are probably going to be just as excited. The Corsons, the Tuckers, everybody else, Cujo, that are in this market. They live in Toronto. They stick around and are a big part of the club there. Yeah, there we go. All right, close. Came close to the 200, but I'll take the 850. Gives us some more spins. We'll see how we do as we keep this one going. But look, the good thing about the Maple Leafs is we're going to keep these games going as well. They just love being in Toronto. They love being part of the market. I love playing these games here on Jackpot City. I'm going to keep going with these. Let's get back to the stories. Let's get back to the action here on North of the Boards. Let's shift a little bit. Let's find out what's stewing here. We're going to do this every week. We're going to bust out some fun stories that you and Belzy and others that we have some guests on the show from their careers and whatnot. So I'll let you take it away here. What's on your mind? What's stewing?
Well, I think with my stories, I try to have a parallel with what's going on in Leafland or in the NHL hockey world. And, the booing the other night for Mitch Marner reminds me of my days in Atlanta where, whenever we'd come into Toronto, you'd have to go and buy a lot of these tickets. And, you have 10, 12 guys on the team that are from the Ontario area. So you really want to perform at high levels. So we would actually come in and have a lot of money on the board where we're like, guys, we got to win tonight. We got to win tonight to make it worth it. We're essentially playing for free because we got to buy all these tickets. So this was 2012, 2013. We're in Toronto and, we get up fairly early. I think it's 2-1, 3-1. Then the third period, I think I ended up scoring to make it 5-1. And then it's about 5-6 minutes. And then similar to the other night versus Mitch Marner, the fans just started booing, right? And in Air Canada Centre, which is now Scotiabank Arena, when you hear those boos, you're like, whoa, this is usually a dead zone here. And that's nothing, no disrespect or anything, but it's fairly quiet. So the boos start echoing throughout the building, and we're like, uh-oh, guys, like they're really turning on the team here. It's maybe point night. Let's try to get a couple more goals. So I wasn't on the ice for this, but there's about 5 minutes left, and all of a sudden the fans start cheering as the whistle blows. And we're like, what just happened? Is there a fight? Something's going on. I'm on the bench. I take a look over. There's about 3 or 4 waffles on the ice. Someone from the 100 levels threw a bunch of waffles on the ice. And I actually think it hit Colby Armstrong or somebody like that. So that's my first time. I've seen jerseys get thrown on the ice. I've seen bottles, maybe a battery, but never Eggo waffles. So I think, they should have got some sponsors by Kellogg's if that was the case too. But that was my first time seeing waffles hit the ice. And that's notoriously known as WAFFLEGATE. And I got to experience that head on.
Yeah, I remember, I wasn't there for that, but I remember that whole scenario playing out, that whole situation, and everyone just being super confused as to like, why the hell are you throwing, why is a waffle on there? Like, what? Why is this a thing? And then it evolved into a thing because it's funny and is like, in hindsight, is funny. And you're like, why? This is interesting. I could have just imagined just being on the bench or just being on the ice and looking over and be like, did someone just throw waffles at us? Why is this? That doesn't make any, throw other stuff. At least make it make sense. I wish I was on the ice. Who was it that they threw the hamburger on the ice? They took a bite out of it. If I was on there, I probably would have picked it up and took a bite. If I paid for the Maple Leafs, that'd probably equal a sponsorship for the rest of your life there too. And that's another thing too. It's like, well, did they plan on bringing it to throw it, or they usually was it like Napoleon Dynamite, putting it in their pocket just to eat later and maybe snack on? We know the prices are expensive and they want to save some money, but we got a good laugh at it. And I'm sure again, I was buddies with a couple of the Maple Leafs at the time. They're like, Stewie, was that your family that threw the waffles? So they had some fun with it too. If you have to, I guess, in that scenario, right? You got to just laugh it off and be like, all right, well, interesting. That's good. And of all these years, I didn't realize you were the opponent when that happened. You were on the other side, which is pretty cool because you get to see that. Like you just said it. You were on the bench and you see it, and you're like, and people bring this back and be like, remember when someone threw waffles on the ice in Toronto? And we've seen over the years people throw jerseys on the ice in this market, but the waffle thing is definitely unique to ACC and now Scotiabank here in Toronto. Stu, that was awesome. Let's shift gears. Let's get back to what's going on with these Maple Leafs right now. And, they have the Buffalo Sabres coming up here. They've just lost 4 in a row, 1 point. They're 0-3-1 in the last 4. How big is this game against the Buffalo Sabres? Like, is this not just must win, but get 2 points in regulation type of vibe?
Well, I promise this is not a recording, but I think this is about the 3rd or 4th time that we've talked about it being a must-win, right?
Yeah,
and it is. And you take a look at that Buffalo Sabres team, right? That it got 18 points, in a row or something like that. Yeah. Like they went on a huge streak since replacing Kevin Adams, at the GM position. So it's not impossible, right? And what you don't want to do is you don't want to limp into the playoffs and, you got to win 8 out of the last 9 games. And then now, congratulations, you get to play the Tampa Bay Lightning and get swept, right? So I think for Toronto, there's still enough runway here where you can make it and sort of control your destiny, right? Last week, the Florida Panthers were 2-3 points behind Toronto. They're ahead of them now, but they've dug themselves in this current slump that they're in, that they're now, 5 points behind the Boston Bruins for the final wild card. So they have some ground to make up here. But the problem with that now is after tonight versus Buffalo, where are they going on a 4-game Western road swing, right? Where regardless of how you do, teams are getting points off each other in their own division and in this conference in the East as well. So that's the difficult part, not getting the points, but leapfrogging the 3, 4, 5 teams that are in between you and that final and 8th playoff spot. So it is a must win. It's a must win in regulation. But again, for me, it's not about the result. It's about the process, right? And you saw the last one they had versus the Winnipeg Jets. Like, they were down 2-0. They were down 3-1. The scratching and clawing, I'm just worried now as you get into after the All-Star break, it is fatiguing every single game. You need a couple easy wins. You need a couple. Where's the Nashville win, right? You need a win where it's just, from the beginning, you're going to get the win. And I'm worried about this group really running out of gas. So I think they match up well against Buffalo. The specialty teams were starting to get special as of late. The top penalty kill in the National Hockey League power play cooled off a little bit, but it's still performing at a decent level. But they got to get a big win, and they got to have a pretty decent road swing. If not, they're going to be going to therapy over the over the break to sort of break. How do we get back here? We got to get some mind break here. So we'll see how it goes, but it's a big game any way you dice it, and they desperately need 2 points on Tuesday.
If they've got 5 games left before the Olympic break. It's win 4? Like, is that realistic? Like, for them, for their playoff chances, do they have to basically now win 4 of the next 5?
They do, right? But how do they finish it? Back-to-back with Calgary and Edmonton? Like, that's tough. That's tough, right? And, you got Connor McDavid and Draisaitl waiting. I think it's the last game, I believe, before the Olympic break. And they're going to be licking their chops. And anytime you play the Toronto Maple Leafs, other teams get ready for them. So, you look at the last 4 or 5 games, it's like, well, what can you hang your hat on? What's the positive here? If you continue to do this, you're going to have success. And, the last 4 or 5 games are indicating, what is going great with this group. I'm not too sure. So, again, we'll do our best to try to be optimistic, cautiously optimistic, but they have to go on a run. And it's not going to be, hey, you got to win 9 of the last 10. You know how difficult that is, game 72, where there's no power plays. Refs are putting their whistles away. Guys are banged up. Guys are hurt. It's definitely tough. They gotta get a move on sooner than later.
So how do they deploy the goalies now moving forward? Because I'm not sure who's getting the Buffalo start yet as we're recording this. But Stolarz came back. He played against Vegas. Wall played against Colorado on Sunday afternoon. There's no back-to-backs, but every day is you've got an off day in between, so you don't have the back-to-backs to worry about. Do you just figure out who's hotter and just give them the larger amount of starts, or do you just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth? How would you deal with the goaltending situation?
Well, I think you just, put both their pitchers on a dartboard and throw darts, right? But
at this point,
I think you pull them in. You have a conversation. But this is where you really rely upon, your goaltending coach, right? And yes, we go down to the practices and watch, but there's a lot of private sessions, especially with the goaltending coach, where they have a good indicator on how the goaltenders are performing on and off the ice, how they're feeling. Is there anything that's bothering them mentally? Are they tweaked up or anything like that? So I think that's going to factor into this decision, but they need one of these two to step up and step up big. And that was the big catalyst for them having success last year. And the question is, is it Stolarz or Wall? So the fact that we're asking that's a problem within itself. So the good thing is again, I think when challenged, both have risen to the occasion. And I think now having a true competition, and that's what I think made them great last year, them pushing each other is going to bring out the best of their abilities. So who do I think it is? I think you got to maybe go with Stolarz. I think Wall, his last couple starts, has been very, very leaky. I didn't like any of those goals against Colorado. I didn't even like the empty net, and he wasn't even in the net. I didn't like that one. I didn't like the shot of him on the bench. I didn't like that. He should have had that. But,
yes. Just reach. Make an effort.
I think, with Stolarz, again, him coming back, maybe rejuvenated, a little bit of rest and recovery. I think with him and his size, once he gets a little bit more comfortable in the crease, I could see him being the go-to goalie. But in Leafs land, we're talking about trading one right now. I'm like, well, you're going to put Hildeby into the race, right? And I've had a conversation with some of the insiders with Montreal. Montreal is not going anywhere unless it's Samuel Montembeault. He has to be the guy. And if he's not the guy, they are not going anywhere in the playoffs. So I think for this Maple Leafs team, I think it's going to be Stolarz. They need him to step up because I think Wall, the moment's just maybe a little bit too big for him right now. But I think that competition, when one guy has an off night and the other guy goes in and performs well, it's going to push the other one to be better.
Yeah, and look, that's healthy competition. That's what, especially goaltenders, they thrive off that. We saw what happened in Boston when Ullmark and Swayman were there. They were feeding off each other. They had the whole big end of game celebration. They were doing well, and then ultimately one gets moved and the other gets the starter's job, or they both get the starter's job, but now on different teams. So we'll see kind of, I guess what transpires there. Willie Nylander.
Who's the go-to guy? I'm putting it on you. We gotta do some hot takes here.
Okay.
Who's going to be the old go-to guy when it's all said and done?
I think it has to be Stolarz. I do. I agree with you. I think it has to be. I think Wall's going to get there. But you gave Stolarz the contract. You've been patient with him as he's, recovered from his injury. I don't know about throwing him straight to the Wolves against Vegas, but he would have had to start against either them or Colorado or Buffalo. So it doesn't really matter. They're all hard teams. For me, I guess Stolarz has to be your guy. He's got to be the guy that's going to step up and kind of take the reins. And that's why you brought him in. And that's why you signed him to a 4-year extension. So I think he's got that. I think he's capable of it. It's his to take hold of, basically. Own it, go out there, claim your crease, be the guy, and give this team more of an opportunity to pull up collective W's. Because like we just talked about, starts in Buffalo here against the Sabres at home, and then you're on the road for 4 out west. You need 4 of these 5. It's either Buffalo or Edmonton is where you can lose one. Not can, but that's probably what's going to happen. You got to steal the other one. And then the other 3, Seattle, Vancouver, Calgary, all winnable games. So 3 for sure. You need 4 at least to pull that off. And I think Stolarz is the guy.
Yeah, and I think the good thing about Stolarz, right, him being out for a significant amount of time. Yes, the Olympic break's coming up.
Right.
But I don't think he's going on a 10-day vacation. He's probably going to take a couple of days off. He's going to get back to work. So hopefully he'll be sharp coming in to hit the ground running, right? I'm on the first plane to Cancun, and I'm making it back at 11:59, with a couple waters on the plane there too. So I think that's the one positive too is, typically guys that have been out an extended period of time around that time sort of put some extra work in. I think that's one thing the fans should realize, that's a good indicator that Stolarz should come back well rested and ready to go.
Yes. He should, and they're going to need him more than ever in that part of the season because it's gung ho all over again with the schedule between when the guys come back on February 22nd. The games happen on the 25th. I believe it's the 25th, and then you got the trade deadline March 6th, and then you've got the end of the regular season in the what is it, the April 11, 12, 13, something along those lines. So that runway isn't that long anymore, and everything's going to be coming at you pretty tight. If they can't pull this off before the Olympic break, then what? Do you look at this team as maybe they start to sell some pieces and focus on next year? Or because of the market that they're in, they almost have to be buyers, but maybe cautious ones? Where do you think, if things go awry here or keep going awry over these next 5 games before the Olympic break, if you're Brad Treliving, their GM, what the heck do you do?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, right? And is it more likely that they punt to next season or try to pull off a blockbuster, right? And it's funny, right? The fans were calling for, maybe taking Yancroke out of the lineup and elevating Scott Lawton to a top 6. And what happened conveniently, like 2 days later? That's what happened, right?
Yeah.
So not say the fan base. They say if you listen to the fans, one day you will sit amongst them. But
Yes.
there is a little bit of that factor where, like, they dictate a little bit of what goes on here, right? So I can't see them just saying, hey, you know what? We're punting. OEL, thanks for coming. We're going to send you to contender back down to Florida. McMahon, yeah, we can't afford the 5. Like, I don't think Leafs Nation is ready for that. Like, I hear the mumblings, we got to strip it down, trade everybody, Carlton the Bear, take his head off and send him up the river, and we need a new mascot. I see it. I understand that, but I don't think deep down they would accept that, right? Wafflegate, do you know how bad it was and how many players, if you go back and look at some of those rosters, like it was hard.
Those were rough.
It was hard on the fan base. And, some of those names, like I play with those guys in the minors. I'm like, you're playing second line, first line in Toronto. Like, good luck, Toronto, right? So I don't think they could say, hey, we're gonna do a conscious uncoupling with some of these guys and hit a reset button. I don't think that's going to happen. So I could see them potentially adding, but ultimately them winning is going to dictate that, or them not winning is going to dictate exactly what there's going to happen. So I don't think it's going to happen coming back from the Olympic break. I think it's going to happen closer to the deadline. But I could see them getting the right pieces. And remember, what is the number one initiative for the GM? Obviously win. Do you know what number 2 is? Self-preservation. So he's got to do something to save his bacon, and that's the nature of the business. And I could see him doing something to improve the club, not strip it down and try to explain to the fan base that, yes, there were some jerseys that sold, but it's all in the greater interest of the club. And, we're going to, give the 5th overall pick or 6th overall pick to the Boston Bruins. All is great. I don't think the fan base is going to accept that.
No, I agree. And I don't think this is a scenario where they're going to try to get, Artemi Panarin, for example, because A, I don't think they have the assets to do it. But B, pure rental, I don't know if that's the direction they want to go. I think if they're looking at this group, like I would like them to see, or I would like I mentioned it before, 4 top 6 wingers. So you've got 2 holes. So you've got the right side on the first line, effectively, and you got the left side on the second line, or center, and you shift JT over to the left side and you get somebody there. But those types of moves, like I know St. Louis is willing to trade Jordan Kyrou, and there's all these rumblings over Robert Thomas. I just don't know if the Leafs have the ammunition to go after those kind of guys. Like even Jordan Kyrou, who'd probably look pretty good on Austin's wing. What are you giving up? Like, I don't think there's enough that they may have to pull something like that off. And I'm just using those guys as examples. Like there's obviously other players out there. But I just don't know for that caliber player, Stewie, I don't know if they have the ammunition to pull it off or the willingness to make that happen. If you package up Easton Cowan for a guy in his mid to late 20s who's signed for 6-7 years, then maybe you can justify a little bit of that because you've got term, you've got control, and he's going to be with your group for a long period of time. But outside of that, like I don't even know how much of an appetite they have to move Cowan or Ben Danford or They got a finish kid
Well,
on the
who
back
else?
end. Yeah, I mean,
Right?
there's,
Yeah.
other than that,
Right?
there's
The
not
cupboards
really
are
much.
bare. The cupboards are bare, and typically, those are moves that are reserved for the off season,
Right.
right? And all, something of those, of that significance, right? But again, you take a look at what the Florida Panthers did at the deadline and bringing Brad Marchand, and where were the insiders on that one? No one saw them,
Yeah.
pulling that off, but they did.
We
Right?
failed.
You saw the Colorado Avalanche. Our goaltending stinks. We're going to go out and get 2 new goaltenders. And,
Yeah.
you're looking at some other teams that have been struggling now for a year and a half or 3 years to find the right goaltender, right? So, again, but again, that is firing a bullet out of your chamber that sort of now puts the onus back on the GM. And this is a big, big risk, right? So GMs typically tend to play a little bit safe as, again, that self-preservation kicks in. So what do you do? What do you do? And I think it has to come in, from internal, right? But again, maybe you elevate Easton Cowan. Maybe you say, you know what, we're going to bump up Nick Robertson from 13 and a half and give him 18 minutes, 19 minutes, see what he can do.
See what he can do,
right? And
yeah.
Look at Steve's, right? Steve just re-signed with the Boston Bruins. No one had any idea. I'm like, hey, I saw him score the other night. I'm like, was that the guy that was on Toronto for a couple of games? Like, no one knew who he was, and he's having success. So you got to have some found money. You got to have some young guys stepping up. And you know what? You can name a lot of the big names in Florida, but there's 5, 6, 7 guys on that Panthers team that are relatively unknown that elevate and stick to the system and play Paul Maurice hockey. So I don't think the home run's there during the season, but at the same time, you might have to get bold. And, you saw what they did in bringing Jake McCabe in. That was a great, great deal that they did, right? Same thing with Muzzin as well. That was a great, great deal, right? They brought it, they had found money with Jason Spezza and Pacioretty. So they got to get a little bit creative in how they do it. But again, it might have to be dollars going in, dollars coming out. So is it a Domi, right? Is there value there, right? So I'm not sure what they do, but again, if they're making the move that they need to do, it's risky. And are they going to take that risk? And I'm not sure they're going to do it at this point of the year.
Would Jake DeBrusk make sense for them? Because I know Vancouver's willing to listen. Would that caliber player make sense for the Leafs to bring in another guy who's got finish, but also a little bit of jam in his game? Like, let's add more knives to the equation on this team. Is that something that you think might help?
Why is Jake DeBrusk struggling? And he's in Vancouver, right? And again, I think some of it is media based, right? Earlier this season, he got scratched. There was a huge deal. I got scratched for 39 games one time, and I don't think the media realized till game 25, saying, "Hey, you haven't played for a while. What's up?" Where one game, right? So coming into this market, does that make it right? Does that move the needle? And that factors in. So for me, it's like, who's going to come in and give you your 25 goals, your 25, who's going to be doing what Bertuzzi's doing right now in Chicago? Bertuzzi, right? But you had that guy, right? You gambled and you guessed between him and Domi, and you end up going with Domi, right? So is that guy out there? And the key is now you're getting him. No one's just going to give him up, right? Like, I don't think Sherwood's not going to be the guy. Yes, he goes around and leads the league and hits and, potentially to score 20 goals, but I don't think he's the guy that, is going to be a long-term solution with San Jose. I just don't think. So who are those guys? There's a list of 10 that I think could do the job. And, I would say, 6 weeks ago, Alex Tuch, like, that's a guy you make a big move because you know exactly what you're going to get, but they're not getting rid of him now, right? So you need some found money. I don't know where you look. Maybe it's under the cushions and maybe under the press box up top, maybe where Willie's sitting. I don't know, but it's I don't think it's out there at this point unless you make something big and bold. And again, is it trading a goaltender? I don't think that's the solution at all.
Yeah, it's just, I don't envy the management squad over in Toronto at all, because
I got a question.
Would
you take that job for $2 million with all the scrutiny that comes with it? Would you? Yes or no? The GM job tomorrow for Toronto Maple Leafs. Not a chance. I would not take that. I would not take that. I had one bad hot take saying Jack Campbell was going to win the Vezina, and people still stop me on the street and chirp me. I get every month 3 people tweeting me that. So I could not imagine the stress of being a Toronto Maple Leafs GM.
I have this every day from every fan base. So I'm used to it, and it's water off a duck's back for me. So I feel I could put up with a lot of the BS. But hey, look, Tree used to sit right behind us in up top in the press box. I haven't seen him in a while. I know he's sitting somewhere. He's at the games, but he's kind of taken himself away a little bit. I'm not sure where he's at right now, but I haven't seen him in a little bit. up there. So maybe he's hunkered in his office. He's just trying to figure out different methods and different options on how to tinker with this roster and bring guys in. Because I think one way or another, you're right. Like these next 5 games and then going into the trade deadline, that's going to dictate the foreseeable future of how this team is going to look. So yeah, Tree's working. He's trying to figure that out. The staff is too. And the guys are working in the gym a little bit. Let's end on Coach Craig Berube. A little bit of an oops this past week. Now, it seemed to me he's got a big gash, first of all, on his forehead and a black eye. The gash required, what, 30 stitches or something like that, or 50 stitches?
50 stitches.
Yeah. He clearly dropped a weight on his head. I'm guessing barbell. Maybe he was trying too much weight and he said it was a stupid thing that happened. So I'm guessing somebody bet that he couldn't lift whatever. And he goes up, does it, and it either slips or his arm gives out. It cracks him in the head. Tough guy on the ice, tough guy behind the bench, clearly tough guy in the gym.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy because, you see all the fights that he's had, over 3,000 penalty minutes in his career. I play with a guy in Josh Gratton that you never saw him bleed once. Yeah. So I don't think he's bled as a player. So I'm like, that looks a little bit more like a barbell. But again, you guys are the insiders. I'll go and take his word for it. But it is a pretty deep gash.
That's rough.
He's playing it off pretty cool where I'm like, could you imagine 50 stitches on your head? Like, ouch. And then he's wearing a chapeau on top of that. Like, that's some crazy, like, that's probably more painful than the actual wound itself. So again, just shows, but again, it's Toronto. And, I remember I flew headfirst and I took out Guy Charon, and he used to be an NHL Ironman, and he missed 6 months. I took out both his ACLs and his MCLs. I don't think the media noticed until about a month later, like, hey, where's Guy Charon? They're like, oh, he's in a wheelchair. Stewie took him out last month. So. But again, he's a trooper. He's a warrior. But that's a pretty gnarly scar. That's a gnarly scar.
The Leafs could use some of that energy on the ice as well. Some of this, tough guy attitude, but get the job done kind of mentality. So, look, we'll see. We'll see what happens with this club. They've got Buffalo and then some of the Western clubs going into next week. We'll be back next week talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs. Certainly later on this week, Sean Bell and I will dive into some of the other stuff going around the National Hockey League. So be sure to check that out and subscribe to North of the Boards on YouTube. Smash that up button and leave your comment on the video. We'll get to the comments. I promise you we'll get to those later on in the week and as these show continue to progress. Follow us on all social platforms at North of the Boards. For Anthony Stewart, I'm Dave Pagnotta. We'll catch you next week.